I am going to simplify the left side and the right side of the equal sign. And we're going to want to get every single term, all of it, everything on the same side of the equal sign, because once we multiply, we're going to see that this is a polynomial function. So let's go ahead and do this. I saw somebody use the acronym FOIL. FOIL just means first, outside, inside, last, and it comes from using the distributive property 2 times. So I'm going to follow this arrow diagram. I'll multiply x times 3x to get 3x squared, because that's 3 times x times x. And then I'm going to multiply x times 1 to get 1x. I'll just write plus x because it's positive. 1 times 3x, 1 will now get distributed to both sets, or to both terms in the other set of parentheses. 1 times 3x is 3x. 1 times 1 is 1. And that's what equals 28x minus 47. I saw somebody else say after distributing, they'd combine like terms on the left, and that's what we are going to do right now. I see that this x and this 3x are like terms. So we're going to add them up. 3x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 28x minus 47. And this is the point where we say, hey, the exponent of 2 means standard form. So I'm going to move this 28x and this minus 47 to the other side of the equal sign. And I do that by adding 0 pairs. A 0 pair for 28 is negative 28x. A 0 pair for 47 is plus 47. And whatever I add on the right, I have to add on the left as well. So I add my 28x, negative, and I add my 47. When I do that, it gives me the grand old equation 3x squared minus 24x plus 47, or I'm sorry, plus 48 is equal to 0. And this is the standard form. All right, and I went ahead and wrote that down because it's nice to be able to look back at the notes and connect with what we saw. So I am going to do a little trick real fast where I copy and paste a lump. I copy and paste a little rectangle of white. So that I can cover up this bar. All right. Sorry, you'll see why. Because I like to give myself enough white space to be able to write, but I didn't quite have it. Okay, there we are. I'm gonna bring it forward and we'll be ready. Okay. Oh. All right. So I just got a little, I just did that to cover up the paradox slide so that we could go ahead and write and you could see what I was doing. All right, so now what I want to do is to factor this so that I see my isolated variable. So when I end up in factors, like if you look at the top here, the original expression contained a factored expression. My ending answer is going to look like this. And when I'm done, I will have just an x in each of 2 sets of parentheses. But I need to re-break this up because it's not going to be the same equation that it was before, since I've incorporated that 28x and that 47 into the mix. So first, everything is simpler if I check for a greatest common factor. So I want to see if I can simplify this at all. And I look and I see that 3, 24, and 8 are all divisible by 3. So I'm going to divide every single term by 3 so that I don't wind up with any unnecessary factors in my answer. And when I say every term, I mean the 0 also. 0 divided by 3 is still 0, but it is important to note that the 3 is divided to every single term in the equation. So on the left, I get 1x squared minus 8x. And then 48 is 3 times 12. So that is plus 12 equals 0. This is nice because when I want to split up my middle term so that I can factor by grouping, I need to solve a diamond problem, and my diamond problem will be simpler if any common factors are eliminated. So I come over here. I'm going to identify A, B, and C. My A is equal to 1 because I have 1x squared. B is equal to negative 8 because the middle term is negative, has minus 8, and C is equal to 12. So A times C is just going to be 1 times 12, which is 12. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 12, but add to be negative 8. So I want you guys to think of things that multiply to be 12. And in order for the product to be positive, but the sum to be negative, they both better be negative starting numbers. If you see the solution, you can type it in the chat. Yep, yep. I see that, Brianna. Is it Brianna or Brianna? Brianna, right? I think we talked about this last time.
Hey, Brianna.
Brianna. Oh, good. I'm glad that I asked because I'd rather say it right every single time. So that's how I'm going to split up my middle term. Those two numbers that are the solution to my diamond problem are going to become the coefficients of my middle term. I'm going to group my first two terms and my second two terms. I had to split that middle term so that I had an even number of terms to factor by grouping. And I factor out the greatest common factor from each pair. The largest number or variable that divides both x squared and minus 6x is x. Now I'm going to divide out that x from each of these. X squared divided by x is just a single x. And negative 6x divided by x is just minus 6. I put a plus sign no matter what the sign I'm dealing with is. I always put a plus to add my groups. And now I factor the greatest common factor from the second pair. The GCF of negative 2 and 12 is negative 2. If I divide out my negative 2, negative 2x divided by negative 2 is x. Positive 12 divided by negative 2 is negative 6. And that equals 0. And I know I've done it right when my two factors are identical. I now divide out my common factor. And when I divide that out of each term, I get x minus 2 is what's left, and it equals 0. So the only other thing we need to know to solve by factoring is that we need to understand that when two numbers multiply together, the only thing that's going to make the answer equal to 0 is if one of those numbers is 0. So I pick all the x's that make either of my factors equal to 0. For example, I'm going to solve. So if x minus 6 equals 0, and I add 6 to both sides, I get that x equals 6. On the other hand, if I want x minus 2 to equal 0, I can add 2 to both sides. And I get that x equals 2. Both of these numbers will result in this equation equaling 0. Because if I plug in x equals 6, 6 minus 6 is 0 times 6 minus 2, which is 4. 0 times 4 is 0. Same thing if I plug in the 2, I get x minus 6 is negative 4 times 2 minus 2 is 0 is 0. So my solutions are x equals 6 comma 2 or 2 comma 6. This is the way that Lumen's going to want you to enter it when you're entering answers.